Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben and this is the Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast. Hey family, I hope you're well wherever you are and you got that thin blue smoke rolling. This is an episode coming to you out of Season 7 where we're completely focused on the barbecue scene in Australia. And for today's episode, we're heading all the way over to Perth again in Western Australia, and we're having a good chat with Dan Ryan from Gryphon Smokehouse. Gryphon Smokehouse. Gryphon Smokehouse is a delicious barbecue joint over in Herne Hill. Now, I've been chatting with Dan online back and forth for a while now, but I didn't actually meet him in person until I was at the National Barbecue and Grilling Association conference in Kansas City last year. I was walking through the main hall and I hear this, "Oh, yeah, mate. Yeah, mate. Yeah, mate. And I'm turning around like, I know that accent. Who else here is Australian? And I turn around and sure enough, it's Dan. And we're going to find out more about how he came to be there and what he was doing there later on in the show. But it's a really interesting story. So in today's episode, we're going to find out how Dan came to be in barbecue. And we're going to find out about the interesting background that he's brought into the barbecue scene. We're going to learn the story of how Gryphon Smokehouse came together and how they're doing things a bit differently to other smokehouses out there. We're going to get into the choice that he's made for the large-scale barbecue cooker in his restaurant, what he's cooking on. And then we're going to move over into the NBBQA. We're going to find out about his long involvement with the NBBQA, all the different things that he's been doing with them over the years. And then we're going to get into a bit of a chat about the growth of the American barbecue scene in Australia. And very interestingly, we're going to talk about the things that get lost in translation. Geez, I can't even translate it properly off the page here in front of me. We're going to talk about the things that get lost in translation. So little bits of details that get lost when we're sort of transferring all that information from the United States over here into Australia. And then we're going to close out the episode with a bit of a lesson on barbecue pork ribs, which is the specialty there at Gryphon Smokehouse. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it.
This is the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast with your host, Ben Arnott. How long's it been since your last confession?
Dan Ryan from Gryphon, not Gryphon Smokehouse. Mate, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Mate, I am absolutely fantastic. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, pretty good. Just winding down my Friday, so kind of thinking about having a beer shortly.
Well, beer is a bit of an immunosuppressant, so I do have to ask you some safety questions first. Do you have a runny nose and a sore throat?
No runny nose, no symptoms at the moment, but you can never be too careful.
Well, apparently we are contagious before we start showing symptoms, so you never know anyway. So just crack that beer and hook on in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, mate, so give us a bit of a rundown on how you got into barbecue.
Okay, well, goes all the way back to 2010. Went on a road trip with a mate, like as you do. Went through into the States and I was actually in Las Vegas and we're playing blackjack downtown and the conversation came up at the table going, "Oh, have you eaten any great barbecue?" And we're sort of going, "Oh, I've heard about it, but didn't really know much about it." There wasn't a lot of TV or anything about barbecue back in 2010. Specifically in Australia. So someone suggested we go to Austin, Texas, and we sort of had a spare dance card considering we were on a bit of a road trip all the way to New Orleans. So jumped on a plane, got off in Austin and started to go around, did a road trip through to Louisiana and stopped off at a lot of great barbecue places along the way. There's a place down there called in Lockhart, Texas, which had some amazing barbecue places. They're like 100 years old. And as soon as I walked through the door of Schmitty's down there, which has the old traditional brick pits, the barbecue aroma just hit you like a punch in the face. And I was like, wow, what is this? And why haven't we been doing this in Australia? And that was sort of the start of the whole concept.
Yeah, I'll bet. There's absolutely some top names there in Lockhart. Aside from Smitty's, you got Blacks there as well. Did you get to Blacks?
I didn't get to blacks that occasion. Like, it was pretty much Smitty's that time around. I have um, caught up with. I know blacks from the NBBQA, but I'll talk about that a bit later on. But yeah, I didn't really back then. I didn't even realize how many good places there were, because it was one of those things where we're just sort of just wandering through blind, going, well, checking out different places, but not really being aware how much great barbecue was in that part of the world.
No. And speaking of Lockhart, did you happen to go to Lockhart Smokehouse in Dallas?
No, I didn't go to the one in Dallas. The other place I've been to was Salt Lick, which is out of Austin.
So good.
And Salt Lick, and they have that iconic open pit that when you walk into the restaurant is right there at the front, which really sort of, is another like just distinctive feature that you just can't see everywhere, because I believe the health department only gives a free kick to sort of mom and pop or well-established barbecue joints that are allowed to still do that type of cooking.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I did admit that I had to walk through and think to myself, we would never get away with that over here.
Yeah, and that's a part of that's what gets lost in translation. What I'll talk about later is, that some of the amazing things you see there have come from these mom and pop rules that they have for barbecue restaurants that have developed long before new regulations came in, and they've sort of got a free kick on some of these things, like these amazing old brick pits and, the lack of ventilation and all the things that you have to tick the boxes off when you're complying with restaurants here.
Yeah, well, the history that they've got with that particular pit at Salt Lick there, I mean, you'd basically have to build the building around the pit, because the pit itself is like around 100 years old or something. And so, I mean, it'd almost be protected under cultural icons or things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the way a lot of those barbecue joints down in Texas get away with it. I know Snow's is another one, which is like an amazing place. I've seen a lot of pictures of. I've spoken to people who have been there, but it's kind of in that same category where it's, when you look at it, go, really, they're just cooking out of an old shed, and then but they produce great barbecue, but they kind of get that free kick because they've been around for so long and they're an icon.
Yeah, and you'd almost have to wonder if there's grandfather clauses written into the OH&S laws. Yeah,
I have no doubt that there's got to be something in place there. But they are amazing places, and when I'm creating our own place at Gryphon, we kind of like wanted to try and capture that in some way, like in the way we do barbecue, and even if it's that just punch in the face aroma as you walk through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just before we do move into Gryphon, you mentioned that you went through Louisiana, which is one of my favorite places in the world to visit. I love all the Cajun and the Creole and the seafood there. What places did you eat at that you liked down there?
I went to, I'm going to have to scratch my head now going back through it all. There was a great place, I think it was called Blue Dog, and it was in Lafayette, and they did an amazing a seafood gumbo there. It was just like, and it was award-winning gumbo that they did. It was just like silk. It was so luxurious. And it's like, I just remember that when you have so many meals in your lifetime, and I remember eating that one going, wow, this is really special. And of course then go into New Orleans itself. And, I think I went to, what's the name of the place that does the world famous ham? I'm just trying to think the name of it. There's the sandwich shop on the main street there that's famous for po' boys. Yes, yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah, the name escapes me now, but I can even see the intersection that it's on.
Yeah.
It's diagonally opposite an open car park.
Yeah, I mean, they have I always look at things from a hospitality point of view too, because they had such all the places down in New Orleans all had an amazing story of rebuild after Katrina. Like they lost, I think, a third of their population, and to rebuild and keep those traditions going after after a lot of the people that cooked their food left, was quite an undertaking that had to be done. They basically built it all back from the ground up.
Yeah, well, the loss of knowledge would have just been horrendous to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, those people that I heard the backstory of New Orleans, and they got cleared out, and it was like a lot of them got moved to southern Texas and like all the neighboring states, and some of them just never returned. So they did have a big vacuum of knowledge there when it came to and people on the ground to actually create those amazing Creole and Cajun dishes.
Yeah, we did we went on a bit of a bus tour through New Orleans when we were last there, and they took us through the Ninth Ward, through the lower Ninth Ward that got hit the hardest in Katrina.
Yeah.
And there are still now, 15, 16 years later, there are still now houses that are partially demolished and just sitting there, just rotting into the ground.
Yeah. It's a pretty amazing thing. I on that trip also, I went to the Astrodome, or I think they called it the Murder Dome, back in where you just went to a football game there in 2010. It was actually, I think it was a world record because it set at that game. It was Saints versus Pittsburgh Steelers, and everyone dressed up in Halloween costumes because it was Halloween. So we dressed up, and it was part of a world record, the most people dressed in a Halloween costume at a football game, which was like 70,000 people or something. So it was a pretty weird feeling being in a town like that. But New Orleans is such a unique place.
Yeah, well, it's sort of it's got that long Gothic history with it too. And Anne Rice wrote all her vampire novels set in New Orleans there, and when you're there on the ground and you're walking around, you can sort of feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's a unique place. I've been there a couple of times. I love the atmosphere, love the food, and just and the characters too. Like that's they're really unique that you just don't get in big urban centres.
No. And if you're heading back there again, I'll flag this one. Willie Mays for fried chicken is unbelievable, mind-blowing. Okay. And go hit up James Cruz at Central City Barbecue for a hit of barbecue with the New Orleans twist.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Absolutely
I really want to try
delicious.
That. Cool. I'll have to get down there and taste it again.
Yeah. So that trip, obviously, as you said, that inspired you and you came back to Australia and you had the idea for Gryphon. Tell us how Gryphon came about. Yeah,
so basically I came back and started straight away. I have a friend and business partner, Greg, who was really into like Italian cooking, and like I worked with him in the outback up in Kew, which is somewhere between Mount Magnet and Meekatharra. And there wasn't a lot to do up there. So we build our own pizza oven and cook wood-fired pizzas out there. And then when I got back from that trip, it was like, man, you should taste this barbecue. It is amazing. And pretty much ordered Smoky Mountain Weber straight away. And he started like literally within a month of like coming back and started cooking. I think the first thing we ever did was, I remember we were cooking chicken wings, and we're doing them in Mount Magnet, and it was just I think it was hard to get the chicken wings because we're in Mount Magnet, and but we ended up doing them on there, and they just got demolished. It was like, wow, this is game changing. And then from there, by 2011, we'd registered a business and started planning, and we got a smoker trailer, like your traditional Texas style offset, built in Mullewa.
Oh yeah, and
yeah,
tell me about that one. Was it standard flow, reverse flow?
No, it was standard flow. So it just I had a look online back then at Pits by Close and Pits by JJ, which were Texas manufacturers. And so I looked at a ton of pictures online, and I got a friend who had a CAD program to draft it up, and then we sent that through to a guy who pretty much, he was a boilermaker, but he was working mostly for doing work on the mines. And we gave him the plans, and he was scratching his head, and we're going, well, how much is trailer going to cost? And he put it down at 10 grand, which was an absolute steal back then.
Oh yeah.
So when he built it, then he realized, oh yeah, I should have charged him more. But the cool thing about that is we actually got an old beer keg, and we mounted it on the side and had that as like a water flow, so you could wash your hands with a setup at the front. So it was gravity fed water flow. So it's a pretty cool old pit. And we used that in the first couple of years of Gryphon, where we basically just cooked for family and friends. And then our first big break was we did a vending event at the Mora show in September of 2011.
And how'd that go?
Well, it was a bit of a disaster, actually. Well, not the fact that we were just going, okay, where are we going to get the produce from? And we'd kind of scoured around, and the butcher in Mora did some really great beef ribs, and there was plenty of meat on them and stuff like that. But basically, we'd only just received, I think 3 or 4 days beforehand, I drove back up to Mullewa, picked up the pit had just been finished. We'd already booked in to do the Mora show and vend at it. So everything was like last minute to get it registered by the health department, and then drove it in. I remember I was at midnight seasoning the pit, only a couple of days before. I'm crawling in there with a mop and mopping it out with olive oil and seasoning this pit, not really knowing what. And we basically cooked on it untested at the Mora show. And
wow.
I was I remember the pork ribs were these, when they cut those shiners that have got almost like the ends where they're triangles, and just all odds and just real mongrel pieces of meat. And you're just going, having seen really great barbecue ribs, and you're just what is this? How did I get this? But I think we did 100 racks of ribs. We did about 20 racks of beef ribs. And then we opened up for the day, and all our family and friends showed up. We were all queued up there. And but the thing we didn't realize, so the Mora folk all wandered past, and they're eating their Dagwood dog and their pie and whatever. And they're what is this stuff? They just didn't know what it was. And that was our introduction to barbecue back in 2011, because it really didn't have the traction that it does today.
Well, I was actually going to ask, when you said that you ordered that Weber Smokey Mountain, I was going to ask, did you order it from a barbecue store to be delivered in remote WA, or did you have to order it to be delivered to Australia? Because I'm thinking I got my first smoker in early 2012, and it had to come from the UK on a ship.
Yeah, I think it was from somewhere like Barbecues Galore or something like that, and it was really quite. I hadn't seen one before, there were the Barbecues Galore was selling Webers, and I think this was a new thing. I couldn't say for sure, but I hadn't seen one before. I go, what? Because Greg bought the Weber, or bought the Smoky Mountain, and I was like, oh, well, what's this though? This isn't a Weber. And he's going, no, this is a Smoky Mountain. I was like, all right, okay, well, we started cracking away with that. But it was early on. I'd have to go refer to Greg to that. But I'm pretty sure it was we got it through somewhere like Barbecues Galore. But it was a new product back then.
Oh, okay.
For Australia anyway, yeah.
So you got that first catering gig under your belt, and then you went, right, we want to do this big time.
Yeah, we want to do it big time. We were both living in separate. I was living in Mora, and Greg was in Lehman. So because we had different areas that we're working in. But we kind of set a schedule, and we were only doing a couple of big events a year, and we're doing a few other things, just sort of dipping our toe in the water. So I think the next big thing that came up was the West Coast Blues and Roots Festival. I think that was around about 2012 or something along those lines. So we'd done cooking for family and friends and smaller events, 25, 30 people, 50 people, whatever. But the next big thing was the West Coast Blues and Roots Festival, which was I think 60,000 people, had some big headline acts down in Freo. And we went into there not knowing what it was like to vend at a really big event. And that was kind of again, a real eye-opener from an industry point of view. It's to cook great barbecue is one thing, but to sell it is another. Particularly and this would be for all those people out there who are, looking to get into events. It really is like gambling, and it is just it doesn't matter how good you are. It's like you're so beholden to like the elements, and if I was to give any advice to anyone about doing vending events is position is king. Position. If you're not in a good position at a festival, you're going to work. There's a difference between having to really work hard to advertise and get it out there. But if you've got the main thoroughfare where the foot traffic's past the door, the product, a lot of them don't even know what the product is. They just buy it because it's convenient. And it's the closest thing to say where the stage is or next to the beer tent. And so that first year we did it, like we were down the back, like we were the new kid on the block. And so the promoters who organised the food aspect of it basically shunted us down the back, go, and we really struggled to make sales that year because we had to be innovative. We had to take out chicken wing samples and really bring it out into the public because they didn't know where we were because we were down the back in the back alley of the festival, and B, people still didn't realize what barbecue was. There was only a few people who'd been to the States who were like, okay, I know what ribs are and I know this and I know that. So it was kind of a tough gig. We sweated on a lot of money, and it was a big investment in, and it was like, I think we did okay. We came out of it alive, but I reckon that particular festival, I think I cooked 400 kilos of ribs.
Oh my God.
And I remember doing it because there's no way you can cook that many ribs on site. Like it's impossible. So what we did was we pre-cooked them, and I had a setup where it was there was a cool room, a freezer, and we had the offset pit, and I would cook 75 racks of ribs per hour, and then would freeze them, and then go and repeat the process. So we had a table set up where you would season them, put them on the pit, wait. So I think I cooked them for 3 days straight and slept somewhere in between. So it was one of those things when you first start out in barbecue, it's all enthusiasm with zero common sense.
So you did everything the hardest way possible.
Well, yeah, exactly. And if I had spoken to someone who is in the catering industry back then, they would have gone, don't do as many products, and don't maybe be a bit more conservative in what you cook. So, we did okay, but it wasn't but it was one of those things where it was absolute Herculean effort to get it done.
Well, it's funny that you say that the advice is to keep the menu. That the advice is to keep the menu simple. There's a guy. We kicked off this conversation talking about Texas and Louisiana. There's a guy on the border between Texas and Louisiana, and all he does is pork ribs. That's it. If you don't want pork ribs, you go somewhere else.
Yeah,
and he is sold out every single day.
Yeah, and that it's a smart play because when you've got less menu items, there's less time, particularly say in the festival setup. The more items you have, the more choice they have to stand there at the counter and ah about. When you've only got 2 to 3 items, it's like you either have pork, beef, or ribs, or whatever it may be, whatever the case may be. That you can streamline production, and you make the sales quicker because you only have a window of maybe 8 hours to sell a massive volume of food. Now, if you have 2 complex menus, you're gonna it's going to cost you. You're not going to be able to turn over as many orders as you can with a simplified menu.
Yeah, some good advice there, man. Definitely. So obviously you must have earned a bit of a reputation for yourself at that music festival and worked your way up into some better real estate at subsequent festivals. At what point did you start putting the permanent site into action?
Oh, look, I think by two, we sort of just sort of had it really as a hobby, and we sort of dabbled in some of these bigger festivals. But by around about 2017, we were kind of looking at going, we can't keep doing it like this. We either like commit to something a little bit more permanent, or we just like, just be hobbyists. Like it was that turning point. And at that point, I'd started searching for the right real estate or the right forum to move to the next level, which would be sort of a restaurant. So, and that's where MBQA came into play. That I had been already, as part of that searching for the right venue, was also like going to the MBBQA conferences to learn about how people in the industry in America do it, from the ground up. A lot of their conferences, things are like Barbecue 101 and Barbecue Business 101. So I'd been learning that from there. So then I knew what the pitfalls were and what structure I needed to have to sort of start a barbecue restaurant. So that's sort of how we've evolved from there. And in the meantime, we were also dabbling in like KCBS competitions and that sort of thing. So it's been a sort of a road of part amateur, part barbecue competitor, and then also the catering aspects moving into restaurants.
Yeah, you just sort of come at it from all sides there, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, like, to be fair, our mindset is, and it has come from all the people that I've met in the States, is the origin of a lot of those great barbecue joints is from competition barbecue. I guess one of the people or group of people that I look at is 17th Street Barbecue down in Murfreesboro, Illinois.
Oh yeah.
And Mike Mills, who is a legend of barbecue, and is very influential he's basically all my friends in the States who have food trucks and restaurants and that have all done his like catering courses and like have looked to him for information about how to, compete, talking about rubs and recipes but 17th Street Barbecue is a real force and a real institution in Middle America. And we looked to them as an example of how to, what we wanted a barbecue place to be. But also, it starts with that whole, that you walk into that place and there's trophies all up the walls and you look at it and go, this is a place that they know what they're talking about. The trophies and the experience that comes from being competitive, and striving to have the best product and present the best food is a good, I think, something that's a little bit unique to barbecue that doesn't always, you don't get too many like places like that at a fish and chip shop or a Chinese restaurant. But you go to an American barbecue place and guaranteed you'll see a lot of them. You'll see trophies in a cabinet at the front or up the wall or near the counter or near the point of sale or whatever. They are driven by competition and that's part of their branding. So I realized early on that was also important for us to at least give it a crack and compete with people, and it's taught us a lot of great values on what it is to put out the best products you can.
Yeah, right. So you took that experience as a competitor and as a caterer, and then you settled on Herne Hill. What drew you to that location?
I guess the rent was one thing, because like
always a big consideration. Yep.
Well, I mean, we come from the philosophy that like, and this comes back from MBQA barbecue businesses. You look at the 30-30-10 principle of business, which is 30% food costs, 30% labor costs, and everything else is in that other 30%. Hopefully, you can make 10% profit margin. Now, if your numbers are out, you'll probably start eroding away at your 10%. But out of that too, they said you should really look at having 8 to 10% top end should be what your rental is. So if you're doing the quick math when we did the budgets, it's like, so okay, if we're paying 8 to 10% rental, this is what our sales goal should be. You know, like straight out before you could work everything out. If somebody says this is the rent for a place, based on those figures, you should go, this is the sales figure we have to hit for the year. Like, can we achieve that? So we looked at Herne Hill, and that was part of the thing that said, well, you know what, we can get in here. There's not a lot of there's a lot of other clauses that you get with leasing. That's like, you know, on outgoings and everything that you see in the fine print that can really just cut into your margin. So we didn't have those restrictions at Herne Hill. And the other cool thing was that a lot of barbecue places in the States that I'd seen are attached to markets. You know, like there's Snow's is near the meat markets down there. You know, there's a lot of places where that tradition is it's aligned with a farmer's market barbecue has, so that goes hand in hand with that sort of thing. So we kind of like that that idea that we're associated with farmer's market. It's sort of semi-rural. We're not in a shopping centre. It gives us a place where we can grow and have a bit of a, you know, develop what we think is the soul of what our Gryphon's about.
Yeah, and it's a top spot there too. We you put on dinner for us when I was over there for the Smoking in the Valley competition, but back in November there, and it was fantastic. We were able to put on some music, make a bit of noise, and just have a good time. Yeah,
that's it. And it's and that idea is like again, it sort of comes back if you go to 17th Street. They own like a whole block down there, which is just basically warehouse sheds, and they've slowly made it into like filled it out. And it's like, well, I saw the potential at Herne Hill that, you know, okay, we start on the small footprint, but if we want to lease more, then we can do that. And it's got that feel. There's a lot of people coming and going, buying produce, and it just seemed, and it has that rural feel, which is a lot more homely, a lot more friendly than what the sterility of, say, a shopping centre or something along those lines.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that sterility. I mean, like barbecue's not a neat meal. We get sauce on our hands, sauce on our faces. So that sterile, clean, like uber clean shopping centre, mall, food court type thing, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and in considering it too, it was like with the whole compliance thing too, it's like to have a smoker which is billowing out smoke is like, and emitting the smells that it does may not comply with the caveats that come with certain shopping centres or that sort of thing. So we just thought that was a better fit for us, like moving forward, that we wouldn't be as restricted out there as we would say in an urban area where it's you're more prone to possible complaints from things like the smoke.
Yeah, well, that is a very good point too. And speaking of the smoker, I'm sure all the listeners want to know, what are you cooking on?
So we're cooking on a Old Hickory EL, which is built in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. We bought that back in 2014, thankfully when the Aussie dollar was worth about 92 cents.
Oh.
So I sort of saw the writing on the wall where this is probably the best time to import a pit. I did a lot of research online again, and what constantly came back is I saw a YouTube video with David Knight, who owns Old Hickory Pits. And he's a lovely guy. I've met him several times, and he's a great person. His family's great. The Old Hickory family are amazing people. I looked at it, and then the amount of these top-name restaurants, barbecue joints that had an Old Hickory out the back was just like, you know, was just amazing. Like there's so many of them, and it's like, well, if it's good enough for 17th Street, it's definitely good enough for me. And it's one of those things. It is a true workhorse of the barbecue industry, and If you actually, when we talked about Salt Lick, what do you think they've got out the back there?
I was just about to ask if you'd been out the back of Salt Lick. They've got it. They've got at least, I think it's a half dozen out there, and they've got the big DWs, the big double wide door ones.
Yeah. And that's that's part of the process. And it's like, and it's the one thing that I don't know whether everyone's quite aware of, but there is still, excuse the pun, smoke and mirrors when it comes to barbecue produced on a mass scale. And Oklahoma Good Joe's in Kansas City also shows that point that, like, these a gas supplemented wood fired pit that's insulated is the most economical way to produce mass barbecue. It's straight out.
You're listening to the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions podcast with massive barbecue nerd Ben Arnott.
So, Dan, you've mentioned there earlier in the episode that the NBBQA was really important for helping you sort of formulate your approach to developing Gryphon Smokehouse and your growth personally as a barbecuer. Tell us about how you first got involved with the NBBQA.
Again, I think it was just where I sat down when we were formulating, we'd build our pit, and I said to Greg, like, if we want to really advance this and also just build on a brand that we had to have some kind of connectivity to America. Like, you can't, there's only so much you can learn online or from a recipe book. You have to go there and experience it. And I found the MBQA through, I think, a social media site or whatever it may be. And we looked at it and gone, this is a way that we can see, hopefully learn from people who have already been there and made those mistakes. And also just I had plans in my head at that point to compete in the US, and I thought it's better to have, what better way to make friends and have contacts that can help you out than to go to a barbecue conference or be part of a barbecue association that you can just speed up that process and make a whole heap of barbecue friends overnight. So that was the concept. And then we went to Nashville in 2015, I think it was.
Right, yeah, 2015.
Yeah, so the Nashville conference in 2015 was a real good one. It had all the big, like, we were kind of starstruck a bit because, like, it had all the big celebrities there, and like, so you had Myron Mixon, Chris Lilly, Mike Mills was up on stage, and I didn't even know who Mike Mills was, like, and a lot of people probably still don't. But all the big, most influential people in the industry were there, and then it's like, so they had their little on day one. It was actually quite hard to get there because Nashville was snowed in that weekend, which was unseasonable for them. And we had to pay an Iranian taxi driver 3 times as much money to drive through the snow to get from the hotel out to the conference.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like, because we got there, we just thought, it was out as close as the airport, and I was like, oh, how do we get out there? So we went out there, we sort of wandered around town. We found this Iranian taxi driver, and he didn't care. He's like, I will, if you pay this much, I will take you anywhere. So we got to the conference and walked in there, and there's all these celebrities there. And then, so they had their meet the pit masters, but then we all retired to the bar. So then you're just drinking with, like, Myron Mixon, like, it was
wow.
It was just like the accessibility there was something that, like, I in years gone by that I've seen people pay a fortune to do, and like, it's just like, you're just there, and like, they all know it's actually quite a small knit community, so they're all just talking to one another like they're your long lost brother or whatever. It's quite a strange. And of course, back then when we walked in, we're the only Australians that were at NBBQA, and no other Australians had been to NBBQA, so we were like this exotic animal for them.
Yeah, I don't think I've even heard of the NBBQA until 2018 was the first time I heard about it.
Yeah. So we'd joined up in late 2014 for the actual. So it'd been going for a couple of years, and I was thinking, well, why isn't anyone else getting onto this? Like, it just seemed like we were the only Australians going to it, and it's such a valuable thing. all the people that are influential in barbecue were there. So it just seemed like a no-brainer to me. So out of that conference, I met a really great guy called Randy Twyford from Twyford Barbecue up in Jacksonville, Illinois. And he's maybe people probably don't know who he is or anything, but he owns a food truck and he runs out of Jacksonville, which is very close to Springfield. But this Randy knows everybody in the barbecue world. Like, he's one of those guys, he's got a big voice and big presence, wears bib and brace overalls and, but he introduced me to everyone. Like, being there and kind of a bit shy, like, this guy took me under his wing and just, showed me all the ins and outs of, like, what barbecue was about, particularly from that hospitality. And as soon as he vouched for me, it was like people would, invite me to stay at their house. It was ridiculous how much hospitality it was poured on.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise to me as well when I was there just last year. Exactly as you said, I got invited out to Andy Groneman's house, like in the middle of the night, midnight. He's like, "Hey, come to my house and we'll drink bourbon around the fire." I said, "Sounds awesome. How far away is your house?" He goes, "About an hour and a half."
Yeah.
And I said, "Mate, I've got to get up and be back at the conference in the morning." So I wasn't able to go, but yeah, it was open doors.
Yeah, and that's the thing that is NBBQA is like, it's not the world's biggest conference, but the people that have been there have been going for a long time. I mean, the other people that I met at that first conference were all the guys from the Shed Barbecue, who are world champions. They've won a couple of them at Memphis in May. And again, those people are like, "Hey, Australia, how you going?" They would like invite you in. And that same year, out of that conference, Randy invited me to come back to cook with him at Memphis in May. Like, that's within 3 months of me actually going to that conference. I had all these invitations to go to places, and it was like, hell yeah, I'm going. And when I went down to Memphis in May, again, I was like invited in to, like, if you're going to Memphis in May and you're in the general public, like, you're just a spectator looking at what's happening. But when you're on a cook team at Memphis in May, it's access all areas 24/7.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to understand, like, what their families are about, the way that they're set up, the financial struggles that come with actually competing at such a big event. Like, you just get all the scandal, all the backstories, everything. It's like, it's pretty awesome. And it's all sitting around drinking a beer, cooking barbecue, and like watching all these people compete, like, who are the best at what they do. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went there for the first time in 2015. You got introduced to loads of people. We fast forward to 2019, and the NBBQA in Kansas City was the first time that I actually met you in person. And you were actually one of the celebrity chefs at the Culinary Fight Club. That was the first time I met you in person. And you were on stage with the biggest names that I've ever seen in one room, having this mad competition. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was really like thrown into the deep end of that. And I find it funny. I still laugh about it afterwards, because, like, I didn't realize what it was. And Saffron, who was organising it, NBBQA, Saffron Hodgson, she goes, "Oh, if you're coming over, like, you may as well just put in for this. Like, they want, it's an Australian that makes it look international, blah, blah, blah." It's like, I'm not really a chef. Like, and I didn't know I thought it was just barbecue competitors, like your standard sort of KCBS, and I'd be up against, like, sort of KCBS pitmasters, and that we would all be sort of thrown in to do something and make it in a couple of hours. Little do I know that it was all like, these chefs from all over the States. And they started calling my name as Chef Dan Ryan. And I find that's like, I found it funny, because it's like, I don't have a chef's qualification, and I don't think that you should be labeled as that when you haven't been on the tools and done it from now. I'm a barbecuer, not a chef. So it was quite a funny experience that they sort of started late. Everyone, like, as soon as you put the jacket on or whatever, everyone's calling you chef for some reason. I just found it like weird. But it was a good fun. It was definitely thrown in the deep end on that experience.
So tell us about the competition itself. You had how long to cook what?
So basically the briefing was that you got to choose 5 ingredients that you could take yourself, like you could pre-plan and do. And then there was going to be they were a little bit light on for details, but basically there's 2 proteins that they put cards on the table before the competition starts, and you draw a card, and it's either pork or beef was the 2 on that occasion. And then you have a table that's full of produce that you get like 40 minutes before the competition starts. You can walk around the table, but you can't touch anything, and you plan out. You look at what ingredients are on the table, and then you have to go, right, if I'm doing pork, I'm going to use these ingredients and put a dish together. And basically you had 1 hour to put that dish together for 6 samples for the judges. So you had to do 6 samples for them. And then you had another couple of hours to put together what it ended up being 200 samples. So that was kind of all, we'll say it was a dynamic, and it all sort of came together at the last minute. So yeah, that was the way it's structured. And I'd never competed in anything like that before. Like, well, I'm sort of like KCBS, low and slow, well and planned, practiced, and this was just frantic. It's crazy.
Yeah, there was a big countdown at the start there, and then there was like a big bums rush to get to the table full of produce, and then it was kind of a squabble, like this mass huddle around this table. Everyone's grabbing stuff, throwing it in aprons, and so there was no real guarantee that you could even get the ingredients that you'd planned for.
No, that's right. And I think the one thing I was like, I grabbed everything going, I need this, I need that. And then it was like, we're going to do like a barmy. And it was, there was no, when I looked at it, they said time, it was like, I hadn't got the breadsticks, and I couldn't make the dish like in that. It's like, okay, what are we going to do now? So we just had like my ingredients that I had brought with me was like, okay, I'm going to bread and I'm going to crumb something, and we're going to fry it and like do it like that. And initially in the brief, I got the brief wrong, and it was I thought you could bring your own protein, and then so I had all this chicken there, and then and I'd planned everything because everything around doing a chicken dish. Then they go, oh no, you got to go do beef or pork. So we did this kind of weird. Ended up doing this kind of weird fusion of chicken and beef, and like it was crumbed, and it was funny because like it tasted delicious, and by the time people ate it, they thought it was amazing. And but I was trying to explain it, and standing alongside all these chefs who had, everything they presented was totally chefed up. It was like these. I think the guys from Chicago had like they had what there was. Maybe the food was this tiny sample in the middle, but they had like beer in these big saucers, and they had sparklers and all that. And I'm just looking at like, I got 6 pieces of breaded meat on the plate, and it's like, I really don't think I got the briefing right on this, like, because these guys have got these amazing things with fireworks and all this other stuff, and I'm standing next to my breaded meat, and it's like, all right, okay, I guess I'm tanking at this one. But luckily, like, people were liked it, and so we did all right in the People's Choice Award. So, yeah, it was kind of definitely something where I'd do it again, but I would definitely do a little bit more research, and I know what way I would be getting myself into second time round. But it was definitely outside my comfort zone from the traditional barbecue sense, anyway.
Well, I think you're being a bit humble there. I mean, I will admit I was quite a few free beers into the evening by that stage, but I'm pretty sure you finished up third out of all those chefs, didn't you?
Yeah, there was third in the People's Choice, I think. Yeah, so I think the key was anything that was fried, when in the absence of no one else did a fried dish. So fried beef or fried chicken was just something that a crowd that had had a few beers in thought was amazing. So because because we sold it out. Like we had our samples done and dusted long before everyone else had, because they just saw whatever it was that was fried. They're going, this is amazing, and then they just dusted it. So it was definitely something. I was definitely out of my depth, but you know, you got to do these things if you're gonna, it's a bit of fun, and you've got to go where you haven't gone before and step outside your comfort zone. That's what we always say.
Yeah, and what an opportunity to get your name known, like in that crowd as well.
Absolutely, yeah, that was the thing. Like afterwards, people were going, I really was just had my head down, like buying produce, and I was busy for that whole conference, like running around trying to get all the ingredients that I could. And then everyone's stopping and going, "Hey, you're that guy," and that's like, yeah. I've got to get to the restaurant depot now. I didn't realize till afterwards, like how much traction that I got as far as being someone who was just in previous events at conferences, sort of being just a face in the crowd, to being someone that people knew and then like wanted to talk to. And I was like, it was kind of a strange position to be in.
Must have been a good feeling though. Now, you did mention that you were running around chasing ingredients and that. I then saw you on was it Saturday morning? You were cooking for the barbecue bash, is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so the barbecue bash, which has been a long-held tradition in MBBQA conferences, that it's kind of like, because MBBQA is a non-for-profit organisation, so part of the money that they raise for the year to keep the organisation going is from the big bash. So they give tickets, and they basically you give out samples and you compete, and it's a People's Choice Award where the people come, they pay X amount, they get, I think there might be 5 voting cards or whatever. They go around, they sample the food, hand you the voting card, then they pick which sample they think is the best. So, and it's sort of a fundraiser for the MBBQA. So I was asked to, again, because it's from Australia and, there wasn't any other Australians that were cooking there, asked to put something up. So, we decided to do a different version, like do an Aussie meat pie with burnt ends.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so basically, that was, again, it's something that we'd practiced and planned, the burnt ends pies back at the shop. And so I think we'd done prior to going, because like we want to place really well at this competition. And so it was going to be a short crust base with a puff top and a mushroom gravy with of a mushroom duxelle with burnt ends in it. So I kind of had that all mapped out. We practiced the way it was going to be done in the production of it, because in the briefing we were told that like we probably had to produce about 1,000 items. So that was like 1,000 party pies to put out, and like so that was definitely I think I bit off more than I could chew as far as my ambition goes on that one. And the thing that I didn't realize was when I was running around sourcing it, it's like, and they have some really, in the States, they have big places called Restaurant Depot, which is like the Bunnings of like food produce. So you walk in there, it's as big as Bunnings, and it has like a massive cold section, and you can pretty much get anything there, be it fry pans or rolling pins or fresh veggies. So I thought, you know what? Yeah, I got this. I'll walk in there. I'll buy X amount of puff pastry, and I'll buy X amount of short crust, and we'll be good to go. And then I couldn't find any short crust in there, and it was like, all right, okay. And so I went to someone there, and they go, short what? And it's like, short crust pastry, and they're like, I'm going to have to Google that.
Oh
like,
my
what?
God!
It's like, what? What do you mean you have to Google that? And then it's rapidly, to my dismay, came evident that they don't make short crust pastry there. It's like something that's just not done. Like as simple as that short crust pastry is, they didn't make it. Like it wasn't available. It wasn't available in stores. It wasn't. I started to ring around. So, and I backed everything into like making this dish. This was it. Like, I'd put it on there. It'd been marked on the cards. Everything. It was like all the banners were made promoting like the burnt end pie, and I was confident with the dish. Like it was a great dish. So then I rang around, and there was an Australian guy that has a place there called Banksia, which is right in the middle of Kansas City, and it's a well-known bakery there. I think they're two people. The baker's from Melbourne originally, but he based himself in Kansas City. He was well known. He was actually that weekend he was shooting for Restaurants, Dives and Diners with Guy Fieri.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he was shooting that weekend, and I'd found out that like they knew how to make make short crust pastry, and I went in there and like. He's like, oh, I've got a lot on, this is a...
he's shooting a show with Guy Fieri.
Yeah. He goes, look, the shop's going to be shut on Saturday morning. Like, I guess I could get some staff to come back in to make you the pastry. $500 later.
Ooh. That'd be US dollars too, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I was hemorrhaging cash at that point in time, out my eyeballs. But so anyway, we got the pastry, got everything set up, and so it's the morning of the event. Again, it's like I pretty much worked through the night. So I'd done a test run on the Friday night. We cooked some batches of pies, and in the old Hickory were good enough they brought over a pit for me from Missouri. So I'd done all the prep work, cooked the burnt ends the day before, because when you're doing it for a pie, you have to like cook your meat and then let it go cold. You can't put hot meat into when you're forming a pie. Like it has to be cold. So the process was to cook the burnt ends, chill them down, and then the next morning was like I got the pastry delivered and was forming the pies from good night. I think I had about 2 hours sleep maybe, but by the time I'd got back to the hotel and then got up early and started at I think 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, because my God.
Because we were going to punch out 1,000 pies for that Saturday.
Yeah.
So I'm busy getting it all done, and the first batch is getting rolled out. The mistake I made was that I assumed it was just like any other, you're the tips for treats process and that where it comes to charity events. And I assumed it was a charity event, and like, we'd have like a hand washing station and all that sort of thing there, which we did. But it wasn't like you're going to get gone over with a fine tooth comb by the health department. And then next thing, I'm halfway through it. We're supposed to be starting serving pies at, I think, 10 o'clock in the morning. I've been working since 4:30. And then at 9 o'clock, the health department show up, and they're like, they were shutting everyone down. They're like, because people were doing it the barbecue way, the competition barbecue way, which is like, it's dot the I's, but maybe not all the T's were crossed. But that's what previous events have been like. They're just a competition, but they're like the city health department for Kansas City were like, no, you are like you're opening a shop. So they were like stringently going through, and like I think in the process, like we chilled down the burn ends, but because they were in the esky, and some of the ice had melted because we've been doing a lot of other stuff and haven't restocked, so that the burn ends were slightly over temp, and they've just gone, no, you can't use those. And it's like,
no.
And that was the problem. And it's like, okay, we can go. It's not a big deal. It's a charity event. We'll just go source some burn ends from somewhere else, and we'll continue forming the pies. No, it has to be all done here. There was no. They were basically just shut it down. They weren't going to like, you have 10 minutes to comply. There was no other like, leeway on it, and because I was scrambling to like put everything else in process, going, okay, if you don't want us to use those burn ends, we can get some more burn ends. That's not a problem. It's a charity event. We just want to put out the pies, whatever. And it was like, basically we couldn't get signed off to start. Like, so that's when I think you came across, and I was by that point demoralized because like, I I'd put so much effort into getting to there, assuming that it was just like just going to be a competition style and then to be shut down like that was like really something where, again, you go in with a whole heap of enthusiasm and you want to put your best foot forward and you want to present stuff that like the product was great, but it's like we didn't cross all the T's on what was there for Kansas City Health Department. So they were like, no, you can't start. And it was like, and they nearly shut down. It took a lot of scrambling. They nearly shut down another 3 or 4 vendors as well, or competitors. But it turned out like luckily they were able to like ditch some things and like get some other things in place in that 10 minutes. So, yeah, it was a hard slog, and it was like, but again, it's like, these are sort of some of the hard lessons you learn that probably a lot of people wouldn't tell you about, because everyone wants to hear about your successes. No one ever wants to hear about your failures.
Oh, I disagree. It makes great podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's like a year on, it's just like, and I guess that flows into like the important point if your listeners, like what I would say is to undertake anything in the US, be it, and a lot of people would be looking to compete in the US, is that it takes a hell of a lot more blood, sweat, and tears than what you think it does, and also your budget. It's something that I've learned, and that's why I enlisted the people that are over there to help, because you need the help. And there's certain things over there that the way we do business here is totally different to the way they do business over there. And it can just be one little thing that you go, oh, I didn't know you had to do that. And it's like, that's not the way we do it at home. And that can totally railroad you. And it's the same when you come to competitions. And that's, I guess, the relevant thing that your listeners would probably go, well, I'm thinking of going and, throwing my hat in the ring. It's like, you have to have all the angles covered. Otherwise, don't bother showing up.
Got a project you'd like to work on with the SHC team? Shoot Ben an email on ben@smokinghotconfessions.com and let's have a conversation.
Yeah, Dan, some absolute some pearlers of wisdom there coming from that bit of a bummer of a situation, to be frank. But let's move on from burnt end pies, and let's start talking about ribs. I understand they're a bit of a specialty at Gryphon Smokehouse, and so you want to tell us a bit about how you put them together.
Yeah, so ribs are something that I see a lot of stuff on social media. Is like the dismay of like everyone's getting shiners, like they're all getting like, it's not, you can't walk into Walmart or Costco like you can in the States and get meaty ribs. Like Smithfield in the States just do like off the shelf meaty ribs. Extra tender is on the packet, like it's easy. And there's any Walmart store you go into, you can get them. That doesn't apply here in Australia. That's not a thing.
Mate, when I was in Texas, I bought a brisket from Target.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, and the quality of the brisket is like, miles
so
ahead of like of what you can get here. So the big challenge that we had early on, and when I'm talking about ribs, is you've got to find the right produce, because like, if you're cooking with thin ribs or small ribs, like they're gonna dry out super quick, and you go, well, I can never get my ribs. It's like, well, you have to get a better, like a bigger produce. Like there has to be more meat on the bone. We kind of put up with ribs, just accepting what people in the industry would say for a long time, and then I got sick of it. I was like, nah, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we went to our wholesaler, and they processed like 80 pigs a week. And I went out the back and I said, take the pig down and let's cut everything from the skin down to the bone, and let's start sculpting some ribs out of this. So the way we do it at Gryphon is we get more belly meat on the rib. So basically you peel the top layer of skin off, peel that first layer of fat off, and you'll get that first layer of meat. And this is through the spare rib. So you'll basically, so it's the sort of midsection of the whole rib cage. So most butchers won't sell you baby backs. It's like they're just not going to do it. But those spare ribs through the center is so we'll get an extra layer of meat on top. Then there'll be depending on which pigs they're from, there'll be a layer of fat. Then you'll get the meat that's the next layer down, which goes in between the ribs. So we get those custom cut, and then basically we've had a rib rub, and we get them processed so that basically we can pull them out of the packet, and they've had the membrane pulled off the back, because I want to make it easier for my staff to, when you're cooking commercially, like I can't be there all the time. So you want your staff to be able to just go, I pull these from the packet. They're a big, thick, juicy rib. They normally our ribs weigh in at 1 kilo per rack.
Nice.
Yeah. And you can pull them out of the packet, and then basically we have our own in-house rub, which again, when we started barbecue, there was no barbecue rubs here. Like there's hardly any sauces on the shelf. So we used to make our own sauce, and we made our own rub. And I got a barbecue book off the internet back in 2011, and we found a recipe on there that we've worked with, and we've had it ever since. So it's just a combination of brown sugar, paprika, chili. But the one thing we found with the rub is like the quantities of chili that was suggested was just Australian chili, I think, is hotter. Do you reckon?
It's definitely not as hot as the chili I got in Mexico. That's another story for another day.
Yeah. I just found that like a lot of powdered chili here is far more intense than what some of the American powdered chili
I see
is.
what you're saying. Yeah. No, I actually know why that is.
Okay, why is that?
That's because in Australia, a chili pepper is a chili. In the States, a chili pepper is what we call a capsicum.
Yeah.
So but we call that paprika.
Yeah.
So powdered chili and chili powder are two very different things. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So anyway, we modified what they had, and I think we halved the actual suggested amount of chili in the recipe. But yeah, we basically just slather that on. There's no extra. We don't bother with any other binding agent like a mustard or anything. We just put it on, let it sweat for a few minutes, and then they go straight into the old hickory. We set the oven at 280 Fahrenheit, and then it's about round about 2 hours, 2.5 hours at that temp will get you to 90 degrees. But they need a little bit extra time after that to get they'll have their color, but you need a little bit extra time after that to obviously get them to tender. It's a bit of a different process. Like cooking ribs for competition is a totally different schedule to cooking ribs for commercially when you've got to hold them all day. It's a different game plan. So if you want to have your ribs ready for 12 o'clock lunch on Sunday, like, you might go the old 3-2-1 or something along those lines, where you just wrap them, you get the color, and then you'll wrap them, and then get them to the tenderness you want, and away you go from there. And then you might throw them back on the grill, get a little bit of char going on, and maybe caramelize some of the sauce that you put on. Just depends what you want to do. But yeah, we get them. So we got extra meaty ribs. The big downside for us is the cost. They're quite expensive at $28 a kilo.
Ooh, that's before you've even cooked them and put the rubs and sauces and all that on. Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah. So what we found though is like our big thing that we do, and we do things a little bit different to, we don't push it more from the concept is that you're having a judge's box. Yep. Like we're selling barbecue that you'll eat a rib, then you'll eat some brisket, then you'll eat some pulled pork, you'll eat some chicken. And that's you've sampled a complete meal. And it's one of our biggest sellers is the competition sampler, we call it. So a couple come in and they'll eat a rib and they'll eat some brisket and or the other meats plus some fresh salads. And it's just something that's a taster of everything. But basically, when you got ribs that I think after they're cooked, their cook weight is anywhere from 660 grams to maybe 800 grams. Each rib is like 100 grams per slice. So, when you think of that in the context of protein, that's a lot of meat.
Yeah.
So that's the way we present it. And then so we're able to the rib is expensive, but we offset it with chicken and pork as a supplementary one item on the plate. But it makes for a great meal. And if someone wants to pay the full price for a rack of ribs, and they pay it, those who are really willing to eat them will eat them. But it's quite a big chunk of meat. So, but they're a great. I think ribs are one of those things that I've always enjoyed them. I think they're awesome. We've won a fair few awards in them. So I'm a bit loath, regardless of the price, to take them off the menu.
Yeah, I really like that idea that you said about putting them into that competition sampler box rather than just try and straight out sell them in a rack.
Yeah.
The barbecue caterers that I've spoken to, they all say that the general public sort of doesn't really fully understand the work that goes into producing this barbecue food, and so they balk a bit at the prices. So
100%. That's the thing about ribs, and we've got a lot of pushback in the early days of opening a store. Was like we honestly thought that everyone that coming was there's a barbecue devotee that was like that knew everything and watched all the shows. And they're on all the forums, all the people that you see engaged in social media about barbecue. We thought these are our guys. These are the people that are coming, and they weren't. It's like 90% of the people that come to our restaurant have no idea. And what kind of ribs have they eaten? Tony Roma's. That's it. Or they've there's been a big misjustice in Australia on ribs where a lot of pubs have put on ribs on a Tuesday night special where they've bought shiners, they've slathered Master Foods barbecue sauce on them and said, here's your meaty ribs. And then people think that's the standard. 90% of the public think that ribs are like something that's like not smoked, boiled, and they've got it, they just slather with a sauce. And some people think that that's great and that's cool. But when we have a different standard, and we run with a competition standard or competition quality of barbecue. We found two distinct types of barbecue people. Some are like bargain hunters, and others are there because they truly appreciate barbecue, and particularly in ribs. Like the people who appreciate ribs go, yeah, I can see the effort that's come into these, and I can see the depth of flavor, and the produce is great. And that, whereas like other people look at you blankly and they go, well, I can get those ribs. I can get a rack of ribs for $20.
Yeah, I'll just go down to Lone Star Steakhouse.
100%. Yeah, let's go down there and get them. And like you guys are, I've had Facebook reviews or like you're extortional, or things because
extortional.
It's one of those things where it's like there's the bargain hunter who goes, I just want as much meat in my stomach as it's a buy in bulk kind of deal, and I want a good price for it. But they don't really appreciate the fact that either myself or my staff got up and maybe and put those ribs on at 6 a.m. The fact that that it costs maybe $1.50 per kilo for firewood. They have no idea. They just think, they're boiled at Tony Roma's. Like, that's the same thing. It's like they're comparing apples and oranges and trying to get them at the cheap apple rate. That's the hard thing. But that's like that's the one thing that I've sort of found about barbecue in this next phase of our moving forward.
Yeah, it's what I refer to as the Macca's mentality. They walk in and they expect that you're able to just throw it together. And you can't see me, but I'm using inverted quotes here, air quotes, cooked fresh in under 2 minutes. And it just doesn't work that way with barbecue.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, getting back to the whole thing of like with your listeners, as far as like to get that great barbecue pork rib experience at home is like just do your research, and you just have to go on any number of the Facebook forums on who is like there's butchers out there who know barbecue and are putting out like a decent rack of ribs that you can go, if you've got a decent rack of ribs to start with, you're nearly there. Like, you've got a great produce on the plate, then, you only have to just follow the steps and you're going to produce some great stuff. Like when you've got bad produce to start with, then it's like, then you really, it doesn't matter. You're not a magician. Like it's going to take a lot of magic to get a bad rack of ribs up to something where your guests are all going to be, wow, that's amazing. You are a pit master.
Yeah, to quote Stephen King, you can't polish a turd.
Yeah, 100%. But the thing is, it is like if you're putting ribs on for the weekend, I would go have a look at where your good butchers are and go engage them. And they're the ones that you'll get the good produce with, and you'll get a great barbecue result for you and your family or the event that you're cooking for. So that's from the home cooked perspective. But you have to be a little, like everything in barbecue, I think you have to just plan out maybe a few days, maybe even a week before. It's something that you have to be organised with.
Yeah, definitely. So there's some top advice in there for people that want to get out there this weekend and cook themselves up some pork ribs. So thank you very much for that.
That's
so,
okay.
mate, I think that's pretty much a good point to start wrapping up the episode. So I'm going to throw the studio over to you completely now. So give some shout-outs to whoever you want to say thank you to, and tell all the listeners where they can track Gryphon Smokehouse down on the internet.
Okay, well, we're obviously at www.gryphonsmokehouse.com.au. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. Don't use Twitter too much these days. I'd probably like to say thanks so far to all the family, friends, employees that, we've got a great group of employees that have come on board and have helped make Gryphon what it is today. And they put in a lot of hard work. It's hot working in the barbecue, especially over summer. They're definitely the future of us expanding and doing the next great thing will be because we have that support of people who are out there doing the hard yards. So I'd like to say thanks for all those guys. And if you want to check us out, we're at Swan Settlers Market in Herne Hill, which is 124 Leonard Street, Herne Hill. So come down. If you're in Perth, come down, check it out. We're open on Saturdays and Sundays. Or if you're looking for a catered event, just hit us up from the website. Email us and we'll make a great barbecue event for you.
Beautiful, man. And that is Gryphon as in the mythical creature, not Peter Griffin from Family Guy. So
no.
Gryphon. Yeah.
Which I believe is the correct spelling. But but we do still get a few Gryphons in there. Gryphon Smokehouse.
Gryphon, nice. Nice.
That's how my American friends sometimes pronounce it like that, but yeah.
That's awesome. All right, look, man, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming on board the show and sharing your wisdom with us, and best of luck with Gryphon Smokehouse in the future.
Thanks very much, Ben. Appreciate it. And hopefully all things go well with getting over to the States for the conference in the light of the current conditions.
Yeah, well, we are recording this about 2 weeks and 1 day before I'm supposed to fly, and it's completely up in the air as to whether we're going to actually be able to make it or not.
Yeah.
So it's pretty scary stuff.
Well, fingers crossed, because it's always great to get over there.
And there you have it, family. That is Dan Ryan from Gryphon, not Gryphon, and not Griffith Smokehouse. Gryphon Smokehouse in WA from Swan Settlers Market. As I did say at the top of the episode, I did manage to hit them up when I went over for the Smoking in the Valley competition there in Perth in November last year. Dan's a top dude, cooks some great food, and if you get a chance to get out there, do head in there and go see him. He did a great pulled whole pork. I'm rubbish today. He did a great whole pig in a La Kayashina box there. It was just delicious. It was so good. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Get over there, get some of that India. It was really good. And so that's it for today's show. So I'm going to leave you with one last thought. If you're looking for the hottest barbecue merch out there, head on over to smokingHotConfessions.com and check it out. There's a link in the description for this episode, and if you buy a shirt, a cap, or tumbler, I'll love you forever because that'll mean a couple of bucks towards our trip to the NBBQA conference in Louisville in April, where I'm actually going to be presenting on the stage if this coronavirus business calms down. But by the time we release this, we'll know for sure. Odds are I'll probably already be over there. And so you can all just laugh at me quietly now as you know the outcome already. So, happy times, good times, good times. Oh, and do keep an eye out. We are bringing out a new line of merchandise very soon. I'll be announcing it shortly, but keep an eye out in the shop for that because it's going to be very important come this winter season. Alrighty, that's it. So till next time, take care of each other and keep on queuing.
Thanks for listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. Head on over to smokinghotconfessions.com for recipes, tips, and Ben's own confessions.